We'll have more on music later, but we're going to talk about hunting now, because it was 20 years ago this week that fox hunting was banned. Now, there are some topics that people may not have a strong opinion on, but I think it's fair to say this is not one of them. At the time, it angered the countryside and cost Labour a lot of support. And now the government wants to ban trail hunting, which was brought in to replace it. It's when the hounds follow a rag soaked in animal scent rather than a fox. Feelings are running high on both sides. Here's Andrew.
It's a sunny Saturday morning, and in a field near Newmarket, members of the Suffolk Hounds are gathering. The hunt was founded in 1745 by the Duke of Grafton.
It's just really lovely to get out, socialise with other rural members of the community, chat, have a good laugh.
Because it's exciting. So your horse loves it, we love it, your family can come.
It's part of the countryside, it's part of our heritage for the horses, for the hounds, particularly the hounds.
Out in the fields, Sarah and Simon have drawn the short straw. They're running along the length of today's route, laying a trail which is partly made up with fox urine.
We really enjoy the opportunity, the privilege really, of being able to follow these hounds, watch the huntsmen and the skill going across the countryside. I don't see why it's receiving the attention that it's receiving.
The hunts are ignoring the ban and they're still killing foxes. It's something that absolutely outrages the public, and so it's time for change, time to get stronger fox hunting laws.
Lovely to see so many of you here today. I'd like to thank Sparky and her sisters for lovely food.
For the past 20 years, people who like to ride with hounds have seen trail hunting as the best way to legally pursue their pastime. It follows a preordained route, and animals are not supposed to get hurt. Opponents, though, say that doesn't always happen. Which is why Labour says it wants to ban trail hunting as soon as it can find the time. It's listened to campaigners who claim that this is more than just a harmless morning's riding.
We know that far out in the countryside, away from the public gaze, the hunts are hunting as they did before the ban. They're chasing and they're killing foxes. Also, behaviour that's entirely inconsistent with trail hunting. Hunts on railway lines, in people's back gardens. We get really distressing reports of hunts going into gardens and killing people's cats or dogs.
But there's not that many prosecutions each year, so that suggests that on the whole they're behaving themselves.
That's exactly why we need to strengthen the fox hunting laws.
They're on the fox.
Last year, 2 members of the West Norfolk Hunt were found guilty of illegal fox hunting, but prosecutions of Hunt members are rare. The British Hound Sports Association insists that all its hunts in the region comply with the law.
We always have permission from the landowners whose land that we cross, and we're very grateful for that. And we do not go out on our days here to pursue wild animals.
But things can go wrong. A fox can get killed.
That is always a possibility, but hunting is regulated and managed with protocols in place to absolutely reduce that to a bare minimum.
On the day we were with them, the Suffolk Hounds appeared to stick to the prescribed route, and we didn't see any animals, let alone foxes, being chased. But the League Against Cruel Sport says that in the east of England, since August last year, there have been 23 reports of foxes being chased and 41 reports of hunts wreaking havoc. The Hound Sports Association says there's little evidence to back up many of those claims. Is trail hunting a way to continue a long-standing pastime, or is it an animal welfare issue? The debate is about to get heated again.
Well, Andrew asked the question for me, didn't he? Steph and Adrian, you both represent rural constituencies. I mean, where do you stand on this?
Well, my view is that we need to ensure that cruelty is properly stopped, and the previous Labour government rightly brought in a ban on fox hunting, but we are still seeing foxes being cruelly killed. We're still seeing an impact on wildlife as well, often killed and
we
caught
heard,
up
you
in
know,
this.
there are not that many prosecutions. I mean, it is legal. I mean, what's the real objection here?
Well, the objection is the impact on foxes and on wider wildlife, and the issue is there is an alternative. We could end the trail hunting and allow things like drag hunting, which would be different types of scents that would not encourage foxes, whether intentionally or otherwise, to be cruelly killed, and that's what we've got to tackle, and there is cross-party support for this.
OK, Steph?
I think for the reasons Adrian said, I've come down in favour of a ban on trail hunting. Not for any reason that's sort of ideological or black and white. You know, I've got no interest in banning things. I am a Liberal and I represent a rural constituency. But I think there are people, even who have maybe been part of this community in the past, who recognise that this trail hunting alternative isn't working on animal welfare issues.
A constituency that would have been enjoying and embracing this pastime, do you not feel that you're not representing them?
Well, I feel as though I've listened to many of them on both sides of the argument, and there are people who've been involved in trail hunting who absolutely accepts many of the criticisms we've heard from the campaign lobbyists here.
Alice, I mean, Labour's fallen out with farmers already. It seems to be that you're putting barriers up with people in the countryside. Why are you so, focused on this?
Well, it's a manifesto commitment that we made. We've done lots of other things since coming into government, so I wouldn't say necessarily it's the number one focus of the government. But as Adrian says, this is actually on animal welfare grounds. I've also had in my inbox a lot of people saying that we do think banning trail hunting is the right way to go, and I'm listening to my constituents on it. So it is about, and we heard the evidence on the clips that you showed, that the foxes are still getting hurt in this process.
All right, so unanimous agreement on the sofa here for a ban on trail hunting. So let's just turn to Tim Bonner, who's the Chief Executive of the Countryside Alliance, who joins us from Hertfordshire. Do you accept that sometimes foxes are being illegally killed? Because this is the point, isn't it?
Well, I think it seems to be the point, and I'm certainly not going to suggest that everyone who takes a dog into the countryside is obeying the law any more than I'm going to suggest that no one ever breaks the speed limit. The law's the law; people should be obeying it. And actually, there are the Hunting Act has more convictions under the Hunting Act in the last 20 years than any other piece of legislation, wildlife legislation, I think.
What about
most of those haven't involved hunts, but it's clearly a quite enforceable piece of legislation. And frankly, I find it extraordinary, slightly worrying that it's been 20 years since the ridiculous legislation was passed in the first place. But the idea that we have to return to this now, that this is Labour's priority in the countryside, that this government thinks that this is worthy, this issue, which is irrelevant to 99% of the population, is worth revisiting, is frankly extraordinary.
Well, I mean, public opinion is not with you. I mean, you've had 20 years to change public opinion.
It is.
You haven't managed to do it. 79% of people want the ban to stay in place, and 76% feels that the Hunting Act needs to be tightened.
Sorry, if you ask people what the government's priority should be, in the countryside or elsewhere, nobody will raise this issue. If you give people a list of issues, which, and we all know the really serious issues, your MPs you've got in the studio, I know the really serious issues facing rural communities and the country as a whole. If you put those in front of people, nobody thinks this is a priority.
My point
apart from a small part of the Labour Party, which cannot drop this issue.
But my point was that if you ask people whether they agree with the ban on fox hunting and whether they agree that legislation around the Hunting Act should be tightened, they say, yes, they do agree with that. I'm talking about public opinion as well.
Well, I mean, those are two different questions, but I think that fundamentally there is a law in place. People should obey it, and that law, on the basis of all the evidence we have, works perfectly well. What are we doing here? Why is this a subject for legislation? And there's only one reason, and that's because the Act that was passed 20 years ago has failed really to achieve anything or please anyone. And hunts still exist, and that is an insult, apparently, to some parts of the animal rights movement and some parts of the Labour Party. Until hunts don't exist anymore, they will not be happy. They will want more legislation. But that is not proper government.
573 successful prosecutions under the Hunting Act.
Yeah.
Does that not suggest that trail hunting isn't as OK as you make it out to be?
Well, firstly, a tiny proportion of those have anything to do with recognised hunts. And most of your MPs here, many people living in your region will understand that the devastating problem of hare poaching and the vast majority of convictions under the Hunting Act are for that activity. But it clearly shows the legislation works. Why are we talking about strengthening legislation when you're telling me how many people are being prosecuted under it? There's no logic to this proposal other than the fact that Labour cannot publish a manifesto without mentioning hunting in it.
Very, very briefly, we had one of our guests, we had Adrian Ramsey, mention drag hunting would be a better alternative. Where do you stand on that? Just briefly.
Well, trail hunting and drag hunting are the same thing. It's impossible. I mean, I don't know. Perhaps Adrian knows, but how you differentiate between the two. It's hunting a scent rather than hunting a live animal. And hunting was banned 20 years ago. That was I think it was a ludicrous piece of legislation. It's achieved nothing, but that is the law.
Okay.
And now, that Labour government told people to go and not chase, to hunt a trail. They're doing that, and now they want to ban that.
Tim Bonner, lots of points that I'm going to put to the politicians on the sofa. Really good to hear from you. A ludicrous piece of legislation. Alice, and why on earth is Labour so obsessed with this?
Well, I would challenge the fact that this is the #1 priority for the Labour government. We've set out 5 clear missions, which include things like breaking down barriers to opportunity for young people, and in all of our constituencies, the special education needs crisis, ensuring every child has a good education. We're focused on that. We're focusing on getting the homes that people need. So we're talking about it today. Yes, there are lots of things in our manifesto, and there are lots of other measures around animal welfare that we've got in the manifesto as well. So I don't think the Labour Party is obsessed with this issue, but what we have seen, and clearly we've heard it, is that there is evidence that it isn't working, that there are animals being hurt through this process, and public opinion has shifted towards this.
Just briefly, both of you.
This is not a big issue in my inbox, so I don't disagree with what he said about the fact that there are bigger challenges facing rural communities, but you can't legislate against animal instinct. And I think the difference between trail hunting and drag hunting is it's not encouraging animals to go after a scent, which is very easy for them to get then distracted on or from by a live animal.
And just briefly, Adrian.
There is time in Parliament to address multiple priorities, and when it comes to rural areas, we need to address restoring our health services and ensuring there's enough affordable housing. And in terms of animal welfare, this is only the start. We need to address things like the massive growth in industrial chicken sheds, which are causing agricultural runoff and huge animal protection issues on a much bigger scale, as well as things like animal testing, where we see animals cruelly hurt in laboratories. So hunting is not the only issue.
OK.